This episode of the While She Naps podcast is sponsored by Search Press North America. Best-selling books for sewing, quilting, knitting, fine art, and many other crafts. Award-winning titles include the A to Z embroidery books and the Half Yard Sewing series. Whether you're a beginner or an expert looking for new inspiration, Search Press delivers consistent step-by-step instruction books for all crafters. You can find Search Press books in all major craft stores, as well as specialist retailers around the world. Find out more at searchpressusa.com. Thank you so much, Search Press. And now, here's the show. Welcome to episode 130 of the While She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today we are talking about going from being a blogger to being an author and a teacher with my guest, Anne Weil. And I am very lucky to have Anne here visiting me today in my studio in Wellesley, while she is in the Boston area as part of her book tour for her brand new book, Weaving Within Reach, which is beautiful. And Anne is the author and creator of the blog Flax and Twine, and a designer of patterns and projects that have been published by Martha Stewart, Design Sponge, Elle Decor, Real Simple, and the Huffington Post. The author of Weaving Within Reach and Knitting Without Needles, Anne teaches classes nationwide at art retreats. She's going to be teaching at Squam while she's here in the Boston area, and local yarn stores. And she's also going to be teaching at Gather Here, and online at creativebug.com and craftsy.com. She lives in Denver, Colorado with her family. Anne Weil, welcome.
Thank you, Abby. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And I absolutely love having people come and visit me in the studio and be able to record live, which is the best.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I'm just so glad to finally meet you face to face.
Yeah.
Because we've known of each other for a very long time. So.
Right. We've been online friends for many, many years.
Yeah.
So that's also a real treat to be able to actually meet in person. So, all right. So you grew up in Minneapolis.
I did.
And lived there when you were a kid. And it sounds like you were a pretty crafty kid and liked to make things, learn to knit and crochet when you were pretty young, and cross stitch too. And so can you tell us a little bit sort of about those early years and your making life when you were young?
Yeah, well, I always loved to craft, always loved to make things. And so from a very early age, I did learn to knit and crochet. But then I got to this phase where I said, anything my mom does, I don't want to do. I don't know if you know any kids like that, but anyway, so then I started cross stitching because nobody did that. And I was a mad cross stitcher, and if you knew me, you would get a little ornament or a little, paperweight or a pillow or a little embroidery hoop with a cute, quote on it and all that stuff. So I loved doing that. Or remember those barrettes we used to weave?
Yes.
I loved making those and selling those and doing all that stuff. And it was just so much fun. And the other thing I did when I was little, and I think that this is a big part of what I get out of my professional life now, is I was a mad magazine clipper. So I would get all these photography magazines and craft magazines, like living magazines, and would just spend hours cutting out photos, putting them in. I had books upon books upon books of these collaged images, photographs and stuff like that. So I feel like I was pinning when I was, a babe.
And were you actually making collages, or were you just like putting them in like photo albums?
I would put them in, it wasn't really collages, so it was photo albums, but I would put them in color families so that they would like look pretty together. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And were they photos of particular subjects, or
no? That was everything. So I would like had this book that was all black and white photography, and then I had a book that was more colorful things, and sometimes it would be a lot of flowers, a lot of landscapes, portraits, just It really ran the gamut.
Yeah. You were like Pinterest.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Like, why didn't I think of that?
Exactly. Yes, think about that. Okay, so you were really visual minded, clearly, and really enjoyed using your hands.
Yep.
But I also get the feeling that you were a really high achiever. Like you're somebody who enjoys achievement and doing well in school, just very achievement oriented. I get that feeling about you both, and that comes out later. We'll see that like sort of play out as time goes by. But you must have done very well in school because you went to a really good college. You went to Yale. And so did making and that kind of thing sort of not really play into your career plans and your sort of studies?
Yeah, it honestly did not at all. And I wish that someone had said to me then, you're so creative, you're so visual, make sure you continue doing this and making this a part of your life. But it just kind of fell by the wayside. I am a big achiever and I always want to work hard and do well. And at that time, that was doing well in my classes and participating in school and doing all that stuff. So I basically, when I hit high school, I stopped making altogether. I did, had a couple art classes, but it just really wasn't a focus. And so it was all academic at that point and sports and stuff like that. And that continued through college and through my early professional years also, where it just wasn't a part of my life, and I really started to miss it.
Yeah, and it's too bad. And I think that, I'm also a very achievement-oriented person, and my parents definitely told me, like, that's all well and good that you like making things, but that is definitely not going to be part of your career or your, what you study in school, because you need to get a real education kind of thing.
Exactly. I mean, and it wasn't even discussed. Yeah. Like it was assumed. That,
not an option. Yeah.
No, art or something creative, that's not an option.
Yeah. And I do feel lucky that we do live in a time when it can become something that is an option and that can be a career. And I feel like the internet really opened that up for people.
Yeah, I agree. And if it weren't for the internet and how the world kind of proceeded and blogs and all that, I would not be where I am today without it.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. Who could have predicted that though?
Yeah. You know. Yeah, you really don't.
And
know.
I do also feel lucky that I did get that great education because I have those tools to be able to do whatever I want. So in some way they were right.
Yes. Well, and the path that I led, I'll never regret it because one, I met a ton of amazing people. Like you said, I'm achievement oriented and I love working hard at whatever it is I do. And I get a lot of satisfaction and a lot of happiness out of just being a hard worker and achieving things that are on a certain path that I'm on. So, and it could be in a lot of different areas. So there, I don't regret what I did. And it also financially made it so I could take more chances and stuff like that.
Right, exactly.
Which I don't think, sometimes I think like, what would my alternate path have been? Would I've gone into, would I've gone into art? Would I have been in publishing? Would I have done, magazine oriented stuff, something more creative, an art director? I don't know. But like that path would have been very different than where I am now.
Right. So what ended up happening though is that you worked on Wall Street. So you were in New York and you were working on Wall Street in commercial real estate, right? Okay. So so describe that lifestyle a little bit for people who have no idea what that's really like, and also sort of financially what that was looking like. I mean, it gave you, as you said, like financial security because you had like the skills and the ability to be a high earner.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seemed like a lot of money when I went there right from college, but you start out kind of a crazy kind of slave to the business, honestly. So I moved to New York right from college and I was in what was called the analyst program. But these programs, you're basically working 100-hour weeks, 80 to 100-hour weeks. You're in the bank all the time. You're staying up till 2, 3 in the morning. You're working on Saturday, working on Sunday. I pulled many all-nighters. I mean, it is insane.
That's brutal.
And it's rough. And so for 2 years, I really plowed away at that. And so I had this little break. And so I was always like a little bit on a different path, because what I really wanted to do when I left college was lead backpacking trips. And so I was talking to my dad, and I had this offer from the bank. He's like, why don't you go do the banking thing first and then go lead backpacking trips? So that's what I did actually after my first 2 years at the bank, is I took a summer and went and led backpacking trips in Wyoming. And that was an amazing experience. I got a job offer from a camp in Jackson Hole. And, that was, again, another path that I could have taken.
Right.
And, but the bankers that I was working with, they kind of seduced me back to New York, come finish what you started, and like, we really need you. And, they make it seem like, it was important. It felt important to like come back and do what I was doing. So I went back and worked another 4 or 5 years there. And I shifted groups and did some different roles. And, but I always knew that something wasn't quite right. I was very good at what I did. But I wasn't happy per se. And I kind of feel like, the way I think and the way I work, I could do a lot of different things, and that just wasn't satisfying. I could see people around me getting like super excited about the deal and what they were putting together, and like they wanted to crunch the numbers, and they wanted to go meet with these people, and they wanted to understand
They had like
the market.
a passion and a fire.
Yeah, for that. I was like, how could you possibly want to do that? Like, my satisfaction literally came from like, oh, my presentation is good, and I did what they wanted, and my model is working, and the numbers work out, and I like numbers a lot. So that part, could be fun, but I didn't like have like real passion for the deal.
Yeah.
And I just feel like you kind of need that, to really love what you're doing in that business. And people definitely had that.
Yeah. You can see it in other people.
Yes.
And I think that does give you a clue. I mean, I know when I was teaching middle school, I worked with a person on my team who was getting ready to retire. And I remember looking at him, and the kids absolutely loved him.
Yeah.
And he loved the kids. And he had been, he was getting ready to retire this whole entire career.
Right.
And I remember looking at him and just being like, oh my God, like, that's your whole career. Like, what? I just like, I could never do this my whole career.
Right.
Like,
right.
I liked it. I was good at it.
Yeah,
I was totally capable of doing it, but it just was not, and when I had a child, I was like, this is my way out,
Yes. Well, it was funny. I remember being in San Antonio in a small conference room, like harsh fluorescent lights. We were there for, 4 or 5 hours studying like what market rates were in the San Antonio business, office market. I'm like, why am I here? Why am I here? There's nothing about this that interests me.
Right.
And that really kind of like flipped the switch. And then my husband and I said, let's get out of New York.
So you guys made a really radical move. And I think it's a brave move. It's one that a lot of people dream of making, but some people just sort of never do. Partially because it's really risky financially, and, it's hard to do. But you both quit your jobs, or he sort of did it first maybe. But anyway, and you moved. You moved out of New York, got away from the grind.
Yes.
And moved to Colorado, moved to Boulder, and just said, you're going to figure it out.
Yep. And then I promptly got back into real estate.
Right.
Which, I did want to go figure out what I wanted to do. And I actually started my master's in landscape architecture, and was starting to realize, remember how much I love creativity, expressing ideas through art. I was really passionate. And then I kind of got looped back in. It's very seductive when people call you, we need you. They've got a lot of money on the table to pay you. And so I ended up leaving my master's and working again in real estate, for the bank, and
then you had 3 kids,
and then boom, I had
3 years.
In 3 years, yeah. And so that kind of put an end to everything in terms of the landscape architecture, and I then just started consulting for the bank, and that was great. Honestly, like when my kids were really young, I could work a few hours, I could work 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours and be with them, and my hours were really variable. But that is also when I started to feel like I and the making, when I finally moved to Boulder, the making, and I was getting into landscape architecture, the making started to sneak back into my life because that creative fire was really like lit again. And I started knitting a ton.
And I think having kids can help you do that too.
Yeah.
Whether it's because you're nesting and like want to make things for them, and then they're here and you want to make things with them, and it just helps a little bit.
I think it does too. So it started out with knitting, and then, a few years into, when my kids were probably like 5, 6, 7, I started writing the blog.
And that a friend suggested that to you.
Yeah, I had a friend suggest that to me because I really wanted to do something creative, and kind of my initial idea fell through. And she was like, just start writing about it. Just start creating, and something will become clear. It'll become more clear to you. And so I started Flax and Twine in 2010 with this intention, like, I really want to find my creative voice. Because I feel like it can get buried with all this, like, we need to be doing this. And, you start to lose faith that's in you, I think. What I did know is that I loved making with my hands. And so what I wanted to kind of learn and explore was, well, what do these hands want to make?
And how did you choose the name Flax and Twine?
Oh, do you know, so this initial creative venture that I had been on, we were trying to come up with names for it. And so I had been looking for names for this initial thing that I was involved in. And I was hunting around on the internet thinking about things. And I don't know, I was exploring flax, the fact that it could be linen or yarn or, so many different things. It has so many great properties. And I don't know, I just pieced it together. And I thought that word was really cool. And then the idea of twine and twine being like the, winding of things together, it's 2 strands wound together. And so the whole thing just kind of fell into place. And I had said, well, why don't we call this creative venture Flax and Twine? And I was like, I really like that. So then when that friend and I didn't move forward on our venture together, I
see. So you guys were going to do something together. Mm-hmm. I see. Okay.
And so then I took the name
and made it into your own blog.
It into my own blog.
I see. Okay. Yeah. So that's how it works.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was really neat. And I, in the beginning years, I just literally wanted to be making things and putting them out on the blog.
Yeah. And that's what my blog was in the beginning as well. I was like, oh, I made origami. Here you go.
Yeah.
Like whatever. I decorated cupcakes. Look at the cupcakes.
Yeah.
I planted this in my garden. Here. Yeah. Like anything.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it was. Yeah. I was like cutting paper. I was covering boxes in fabric. I was sewing things. I was knitting things. And actually, it ended up being more of a craft-oriented blog in the beginning, mainly because my kids, a lot of the projects were, originated by things my kids were doing. And that's how I started doing the finger knitting and kind of got into that aspect, which is what my first book is on. My first book is Knitting Without Needles. And so it was all this idea of making beautiful things with finger knitting and arm knitting.
So you were knitting and they wanted in on like, hey, can I, because kids will come over and be like, your attention is on the knitting and they want it on them.
Yes.
That
is exactly what
happened. So they start pulling on it and you're like, that's my project. And so you put, the yarn on their fingers.
Yeah. And what was crazy was I was like, let me show you this. And I picked up the yarn and I started finger knitting. And I honestly don't remember ever learning how to do that. But I just was just
from when you were a kid.
Yeah, from when I was a kid.
We were like at camp and
I clearly had done it before. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, I totally remember this. And I just fell in love with it again. But then if when I was looking out on the internet for like projects, because it's this long skinny strand of 4 stitches, basically. Like, what do you do with this? And so that was what was the initial concept for my first book, because what I've come to realize is that my biggest strength in making and creativity, and I think this is true for a lot of creative people, but is the idea generation. It's like, okay, well, I could do this with it, or I could do this with this, or if you could attach it, you could make a wider fabric, or if you could, and so I remember one night being with my daughter who was, like 7 or 8 at the time, and we just brainstormed and sketched like pages of ideas of what you could do with finger knitting. And that's when I was like, oh, this would be a really cool book concept. And that's kind of how that whole thing got rolling.
Right. So you had this idea for a book about finger knitting. And at that time, when you Googled finger knitting projects, not a lot of stuff came up because, as you said, finger knitting is basically like a 2 by 4 stitches or and when you start doing it, you quickly end up with like yards and yards of it, and then you're like, I want to make a project, and then you're like, what do I do with this?
Exactly.
And so you start looking around, but then there's not really anything to do with it, and so you came up with all these ideas of what to do with it, and you actually invented techniques for making it a wider fabric.
Yes.
And these are actually new techniques that nobody had invented before.
Yeah.
Where you're attaching that one length to a second length. So basically kind of like a second row.
Yes. So basically it becomes, you're making these attached rows of 4 stitches. And so in doing that, you can make a bigger fabric so it kind of follows a little bit of kind of crochet style where you're kind of going back and picking up the stitches that you just made.
Right.
And so you can do circular. So like in that first book, you can find like a planter that goes up and up and up, or you can do it back and forth, kind of like a snake. So there's a blanket that is made with that wider fabric, or you can attach them in lengths. So you have like a 8-inch wide scarf made of finger knit strands.
And that is so satisfying for anyone who's ever finger knit to say, finally, I can actually do something useful with this stuff. And if you pick a really sophisticated, bulky yarn, for example, I think this is another one of your strengths, is that you pick a really beautiful, neutral, sophisticated yarn that an adult woman or guy would love, or, for their home or to wear.
Yep.
And so you're not starting with something cheap or, acrylic or like something a little kid would like necessarily, but actually something that an adult would like. And then doing this technique, and the result is something you would actually really want and is modern and, blown up in a big scale or whatever.
Yeah. And that you really nailed it, because that was really my goal. I wanted it to appeal to adults. And finger knitting, you think, oh, it's a kid's thing. You're just making these things, but it's very satisfying, honestly, to be making something just with your hands and yarn.
I want to take a minute now to talk with our sponsor, Search Press North America.
This is Ann Woodcock from Search Press North America.
This is Robert Woodcock from Search Press North America.
And what is Search Press North America?
Search Press North America is the U.S. and Canada branch of Search Press, which is a leading art and craft publisher in the United Kingdom. We publish everything from fine art technique books through knitting, sewing, crochet, weaving, basket weaving, embroidery, you name it. We pretty much cover all kinds of crafts. The method and the process for our books is always to have very detailed step-by-step works to allow you to follow along and learn at your own pace, really from expert guidance from people who are running courses and who are traveling the world and showing their craft and their art skills. This year, particularly in the sewing and sewing area, we have 2 great books coming that are just out now called the Build-A-Bag series that are from the great author Debbie Shore. For her Build-A-Bag series, she uses a plastic template that is included in the books and shows you how to use that template to make a range of really fun and really gorgeous tote bags and clutch bags and all-purpose bags. So these books have been very, very popular, and Debbie is on the Create and Craft television show, and she also has her own YouTube channel where she talks about how to use sewing to create really beautiful masterpieces. Search Press has some very good quilting books, particularly under the authorship of Carolyn Forster, who is a very, very popular quilter and regularly is teaching courses at Quilt Market and lots of other quilting shows around the U.S. and Canada. Her work is particularly known for very strong design and very good use of interesting fabrics in combinations that are somewhat unusual. She's probably our leading author in quilting. In particular, the sewing crew among you may be interested in the A to Z series, particularly the A to Z of Embroidery Stitches, which is one of our really top best-selling titles. We have a discount code that is available, and it will be for all listeners for the While She Naps podcast, and they can choose any Search Press book and receive that discount, the 20% discount and free shipping for any of our titles purchased through the Search Press North America website. The code is WSN102018. That coupon code can be used at www.searchpressusa.com.
Thank you so much, Search Press North America. And now back to my conversation with Anne.
And that also, so that whole notion led to also the arm knitting, which then it started out as a finger knitting book, but that concept really started to like take hold on me as dovetailing with the finger knitting nicely, in that really all you need is your hands or your fingers and yarn.
And arm knitting at that time, same deal. Basically, there was no information out there. You looked for it and saw, well, how did you first even hear about it?
So the first thing was that somebody, and I don't know who this was, but thank you out there if you wrote this comment, but basically I got a comment on the blog. Have you ever heard of arm knitting? This was on my one of my finger knitting posts.
Like, how awesome are blog communities that we introduce one another to these other things.
Yes.
Like it's awesome.
It is. Yeah. It is incredible. And I was like, arm knitting, I've never heard of that. So I searched YouTube, I searched the internet, and literally there was nothing.
It's hard to imagine a time when there was nothing about arm knitting,
right?
Because the craze is the craze.
Yeah.
But there was, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was not dearth. It was nothing.
Yeah, literally there was nothing. And I did find one YouTube hit, and it was this artist in I think Germany, and he actually was doing a very cool thing. It was almost performance art. He would kind of sit in the middle of a circle, and he was making furniture from fabric remnants from clothing production. And so he was arm knitting this material into furniture. But the minute I saw that, I was like, that is really cool. And then my brain started going. Anytime I get introduced to these concepts, I think, oh my gosh, think of all the things you could do blowing up traditional knitting into this massive scale. So then it wasn't just like, I'm going to make a cowl. It was, how do you do cables? How do you do lace? How do you, do these different techniques and different, stitch patterns on your arms and make it in this huge thing without having to deal with these massive needles. And so those concepts all got layered into that first book. So you'll find a cable blanket and a lace pillow and, a moss stitch, cushion and, all sorts of things in that book.
And so again, you were sort of, I don't know if you were inventing them. But really like there wasn't like a YouTube video for you to watch to say, how do I make cables on my arms? Like you were basically inventing how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I didn't come up with arm knitting, but I didn't ever learn from anything.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
I just kind of like said, okay,
I know how to knit. I know how to do this. Right.
Exactly. And so even just purling, I was like, well, how could I teach someone to purl? How would I bring that stitch forward, and given what I know about knitting? And so I came up, with this technique. Now, other people have purled now as well. But
of course.
It's just purling. But,
yes.
But, but all those instructions were things that I just explored and kind of did as I wrote the book and wrote the patterns for the book.
And did you ever have the feeling, I know with my second book, I was like sitting on the idea for it, and I was like, this is such a good idea. My second book is about how to design your own stuffed animals, and there was no book in the market that was like it. And I had the idea, and I'd had it for a while, and sort of was getting ready to pitch it, and et cetera, and was like sort of holding my breath like someone else out there is going to beat me to it.
Yeah.
Because it's just such a good idea. And I just know, like, I don't know. Did you ever have that feeling?
I did. And actually when I first talked to my publisher, so there were three publishers interested
You had
in
an
the book.
agent.
I did.
So who was your agent?
So it's Stephanie von Borstel with Full Circle Literary, and I had gotten to her through some other creative friends. But basically, I had started writing this finger knitting book proposal. Somebody had come to me, a publisher had come to me and asked me about a finger knitting book, and I said, "That's so funny. I have this proposal." But that kind of lit this fire, like I want to get this out there. And so then when I submitted it to Stephanie, I said I also had this idea of incorporating arm knitting. She took that concept out to, 8 or 9 publishers, and 3 publishers were interested in the book. But they were all very different concepts. So one was, I just want a finger knitting book for kids. And one was, 50 or 60 finger knitting projects. Oh my God, that's a lot of projects. And then one was this kind of lifestyle concept with finger knitting and arm knitting. And I just thought, and with where I could control the photography and the art direction and kind of how the whole book would look. And so I knew that was the one I wanted.
And I think people don't necessarily realize sometimes how this thing works, but when you have a book idea and a book proposal and you send it out to publishers, often when the publisher comes back to you and says, yes, we're interested, what they do is they say, here's what we want. In other words, we're interested in you as an author. We're interested in the idea in general, but we have our own concept. Right. So the idea in general of finger and arm knitting, yes, but we want a book for kids. Yeah. Or yes, but we want the finger knitting Bible. So we want a million of them or whatever it is. And so, you have to then say, well, I don't really want that or whatever. And kind of go with the one or not that is actually meeting your vision.
Yeah. And it was tempting for various reasons to go with those other 2 offers. One was with Melanie Fallick and STC. And I just thought, oh my gosh, to work with her would be so incredible. So that was the kids' book, and that was very tempting. And then the other one was with Workman, and they have an amazing distribution, and that would have been a very successful book. And I really loved the person
It's almost like you could have written the book 3 times over.
Yeah, I feel like I could have, because it was 3 very, very different books. But I also knew that I didn't want to be a finger knitter or arm knitter for the rest of my life. Like, I love to explore all crafts, and people for so long have been like, you need to specialize, you need to focus. And I don't want to focus. I love to embroider. I love to sew. I love to crochet. I love to knit traditionally. I love to finger knit. And I just, to me, it's more about, like you said, kind of finding materials that really resonate with my aesthetic and transforming them into something beautiful through various crafts.
And the photography is really important to you. Mm-hmm. So we should also mention here that you're a great photographer.
Thank you.
And you take beautiful pictures, and people should go over to the Flax and Twine website and just see your photography and look at, you have various patterns and products that you sell, and look at your product photography and just kind of get a sense, because they're very bright, very white, very neutral, and you have a certain look. And I think, the other thing a lot of times people don't necessarily realize is that some publishers don't necessarily allow you to have as much control. Yes. And other ones do. And so part of the negotiation when you're looking at writing a book is, well, how much of this am I really going to have a hand in? And some authors, frankly, don't want a hand in it, and some do.
Right. And that was super important to me, because photography, and this is, like I said, it was something I loved when I was little, and I just get this real response to photography. When it hits me right, I'm in love. I just think it's the proportions and the color and the texture is just like, I love it. And that's what I want to feel, especially when I'm putting out my own work. I want to feel that resonance that makes me say, like, that's gorgeous. And so I really did not want to have that in someone else's hands. And so it has been amazing working with Pottercraft. They have been great. They really listened to my vision and my, where in like the direction I want to go.
So who did the photography for the first book?
So the first book was a combination of people, and I don't recommend that just because I realized later you deal with different photographers.
When you write your first book, you learn a lot.
You learn a lot.
Let's just say that too. It's so a wonderful experience in that you learn a lot for better and for worse. And so then for, subsequent books and other projects, you're a great advocate for yourself because you're like, here's what I need to have.
Yeah. And it was really interesting because the first photographer, so one of the photographers was out of New York. Her name is Lucy Schaefer. I went to college with her. She is amazingly talented. She does a ton of commercial photography. So she does a lot of cookbooks. She does a lot. So working with her, I mean, she was a machine. She was amazing, very professional. I got 2 shots of each thing. And that was kind of, that was it. She would frame it up. I would approve it. I got the 2 shots. Whereas I worked with this other photographer, Jessica Peterson, who is more of a lifestyle photographer. And, it was much more, kind of go with the flow. And I got just a ton more photos, more to choose from, but they were more flowy is the best way I can describe it. It was kind of less structured. But those were also more of the model shots. So that kind of made sense. So I did most of the model shots in one location and then a lot of the homeware stuff somewhere else. But if I did it again, when I did it again, I did it all in one place, all at one time, all with one photographer. Mm-hmm. And I worked with Brittany Jepson of House That Lars Built on when I did the shoot in Utah, and she's just amazing.
That was for like photo styling for
photo styling. So she really helped me, I would just send her all these images of what I wanted and she got the stuff, pulled it together, really made it, look how I wanted it to look.
Yeah.
And that was really exciting. And then I worked with Pam Morris as a stylist in New York, and the same thing, like in New York, there are just so many resources and they can pull from all these, prop houses and just get this really cool stuff. And so that was great in New York. And I feel like they blended well enough that I don't think anyone looking through that first book would be like,
those are choppy.
Yeah, those are different.
Yeah.
I mean, they are different, but it all still has the same look because it all was directed kind of by my vision and that sort of thing. And then the second book, Weaving Within Reach, was all shot by Rebecca Stumpf. And one of the things about writing Weaving Within Reach is, so we didn't really get this in my story, but we moved to Baltimore after living in Boulder for many years. And we lived there for 3 years and then came back to Colorado about 3 years ago. So when I first started working on this book, we had just returned to Colorado. And there was something special about being back. And I really wanted the whole book to kind of be grounded in Colorado and in coming home. And so what I did was I got a Colorado stylist and a Colorado photographer and a Colorado assistant. And I went on a hunt all over Colorado for like cool locations. So there are these little mountain towns and cafes that were just like gems, and it's more difficult in Colorado because you don't have the same resources in terms of like what you might find in New York. And I realize now probably how hard it was for Brittany to like collect everything too. But so I was more involved in like what we were getting and how it was going to be incorporated into the shoot on this book. And, I always look at it with a critical eye. So I look at it and think, oh, I wish we had done this. I wish we had done that. But I'm really happy with the images and how they came out and kind of the feel of it. And
I want to talk a little bit about publicizing a book, marketing a book, because I think that that's something that takes a lot of authors, especially new authors, by surprise.
Yeah.
And especially today when, frankly, publishing houses may not have as many resources to put toward marketing. They do expect that authors are going to come to the table with their own resources for marketing and publicity. And a lot of times that's actually a factor in how they choose the author, is the size of the author's platform and the ability for the author to bring that marketing, muscle to the table. So But I do think you've done a really good job. Obviously, the publishing house agreed with you because I know that they said to you that that your first book did really well, and that they really wanted you to sort of be, one of their sort of craft authors, or, come back and do another one for sure.
Yeah.
And so you must have done things right. And I know, like, for example, you created poofs and for a whole bunch of bloggers, and actually sent them to them, and kind of put together a blog tour. But that's a pretty creative blog tour to put together, and a lot of work for you, having to make like 12 poofs or whatever it was and send them out to a really diverse set of bloggers. And I know with this, with Weaving Within Reach, your new book, it's a little bit of a meta conversation, because obviously this podcast is actually part of that effort.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to hear a little bit about how you think about marketing a book and some of the creative ideas and ways that you've strategized to make that happen.
Yeah, it is amazing. It is completely on your shoulders when you publish a book. And I don't know if it would be different in other publishing houses, but it pretty much is on my shoulders, at least, and has been for these two books. And it's funny how things have changed from my first book to my second book. I've really seen the value of kind of the Instagram platform, not only for people to see the book and get excited about the book, but honestly to make me excited about the book, because I love seeing people post, opening their packages on their stories. They open the package and pull the book out, or they're flipping through the book, or they're starting to make their first project. And I think my following has grown, so there's more attention and excitement around that. And then when other people are sharing, so I've kind of, like, on this book, I've had a couple prong, like, I still believe in blogs. Even though
I do too.
It's a little bit of a dying breed, but I feel like there's real value in it. It's like really good, strong content. And so I've taken a multi-pronged approach to this. So I have this blog tour that's happening, and, it's a kind of a traditional thing with 12 stops. And, you can go to my blog to check out all the people that are featuring and sharing the book. But on this one, I really wanted it to be a mix of, okay, they're going to share a project. They're going to, I made a handful of bowls for people, rope bowls for people, similar to making the poofs, where, they can style the bowl in their style.
But you're not expecting them to make the projects.
Well, but a lot of them do anyway.
Yeah, they do anyway. But I do think it's kind of unique that way.
Yeah.
And that you're making them and sending it to them so that they can be kind of a stylist and a photographer. They could even be a food blogger. They could be a home decor, or like home renovation kind of blogger. They could be a lot of different things and still be a really good participant in this blog tour without having to be somebody who necessarily spends 6 hours making something.
And that, you're right, is very intentional, especially with my first book and around sending the poofs out, to get a very broad audience, because I knew arm knitting was a craft that anyone could dive into. It wasn't just knitters. In fact, there's a population of knitters that really poo-poos arm knitting.
No, there is. And that's actually an interesting tangent. So let's just go there for 1 second, because there are, I've been on Ravelry and jumped into that rabbit hole of people who are like, ugh, like this is awful. This is bringing us down,
Yeah.
So how do you, what is your response there?
Well, here's my thing is, it is a tricky thing, but in my mind, when you are arm knitting, you are knitting. You are pulling the yarn through those stitches in the same way you do when it's on a needle. And if you are a careful maker, if you use the appropriate yarn weight for your arms, which is, if you think about it, as a very big needle. And so if you use the appropriate yarn weight for your arms, you are going to make a gorgeous fabric. It's just blown up really big, which I think is incredibly cool. And so to have that ability to kind of knit in that large scale, I think it's incredible. And so I don't really understand how or the negative attitude towards it. I understand people feel like it's a waste of yarn, or it's ugly, or it looks like a net, or it's atrocious. All these things. I have heard it all. And yeah, I've heard it all. But I really think, well, no, it actually is beautiful, and you can make these gorgeous pieces. You just have to be in the same way, you can be a traditional knitter and use the wrong yarn and the wrong needle size and make something that doesn't look great, So I think you just have to be, aware of those things and incorporate them.
Yeah,
so
fair
I
point.
don't know.
Okay. All right. So back to this. So, all right. So you have the blog tour going on, and you had the blog tour for the last one where you sent out the poofs. Instagram. How are you using Instagram for this particular blog tour? Since now Instagram is really the premier maybe spot for this.
Yeah. So yeah, like I was saying, I have this in-person tour. So I'm basically going around the country and teaching various places. Then I have the blog tour. So we've got the blog, and that's a varied group of people. And then there's Instagram, and that has been the most exciting. And basically I've lined up a bunch of influencers and people I like. And honestly, there are a lot of people I thought, I'll get them on the blog tour. And turns out they don't have a blog anymore. There are a lot of people who just do not have blogs anymore or aren't posting on them frequently. And so a lot of those people were kind enough to share it on Instagram. So we conducted giveaways. I recently had a giveaway of a loom with Marianne Moody, because there's a whole chapter on frame loom weaving, and
you sell her looms.
And I sell her looms.
Right.
So that was a really good partnership, and
she's got a tremendous following.
Yeah.
And she didn't feel like it was at all like a competitive thing, because she has a book about weaving.
She does. And I think if you I think this book is very different than
it
most.
Is super different
weaving.
From her book. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think she saw it as a real opportunity, not only to promote her looms, but also to introduce her weavers to a different kind of weaving and a different aspect. Because I think this book really fills a gap that is out there in weaving right now. There's just a ton of tapestry weaving, which is gorgeous, and I love wall hangings, but
let's talk about what's in this book and what does make it different.
Okay.
So this is Weaving Within Reach, which is actually, it does have some commonalities with the first book, which is interesting. It kind of has a tie through in that it is, very accessible to people who, sort of maybe aren't, don't have a giant loom in their house, for example.
Yeah.
And as you said, wall hanging weavings are everywhere right now, and macrame everywhere right now. But this brings a whole lot of different ideation, which is your strength, a whole lot of different projects into play. So tell us what's in here.
Yeah. So my goal was really to fill in that gap between, you have harness looms and, rigid heddle looms where people are making kind of finer fabric and beautiful projects, but that's intimidating. That whole world, it's hard to just jump into that. But what I wanted people to see is like, look, you can make these amazing fabrics and make, smaller projects, beautiful projects, totes, clutches, little zipper pouches, making this woven fabric with a loom. With a frame loom. So very simple tool. But then I wanted to go even further, towards the simple end, which is like, and you don't even need a frame loom. You can make beautiful things with made looms. So you can use an embroidery hoop. You can use kind of rope as the structure for a loom. You could use a cardboard box. There's a chapter just on made looms or invented looms. And then, even simpler than that, you can just weave with materials, and that kind of gets to that whole arm knitting idea with your yarn in two hands or rope in your two hands. And so the very first chapter is literally like take yarn out of your cupboard and make this pillow, or make these earrings or whatever it is. All you need is twine, embroidery thread, and a needle, and you're weaving. So I really wanted this book to get people excited about dipping their toe into weaving and incorporating it into their making life in a simple way, in a way that maybe, maybe you start with something in the chapter where you don't need any tools at all, and then you move into, well, maybe I'll use my embroidery hoop and make a frame, make a loom out of this, and then you move into, well, getting a frame loom would be pretty fun. And all these projects are usable, things you wear, things you have in your home, things that are functional. And I thought that was really important. There's a wall hanging in there, but that's about it. I tried to use interesting materials. So, natural things like grasses or leather or rope or twine, and yarn. So these varying things, so that's interesting. And then I really try and introduce different techniques and kinds of weaving. So there's basket weaving. There are 2 or 3 different kinds of basket weaving. There are different techniques where you learn different fabrics, how to create different fabrics. So like how to do a twill pattern or how to do a herringbone pattern. There are projects where you learn different ways to do decorative stitching in your weaving. So on a frame loom, like the trellis hem stitch is incorporated into one clutch, and doing some simple linings and zippers and things like that to kind of make these pieces more functional. And all of it, although some of it would be easier with a sewing machine, you can do it all, the entire book, without a sewing machine at all. I did everything by hand. I like to, I like to make things with my hands, so hand sewing is one of my favorite things. But it really is intended to kind of fill that gap and introduce people to. Oh, and there's gradient weaving too, which I think is really fun. So that's where you start with 4 strands of a certain color and you add another color and then more strands of the second color. And so that there's a really cool tote that does that in this kind of ombre fashion. So there's just a lot to be learned in here and little touches of a lot of different things.
And again, we're using neutral colors and very sort of sophisticated, modern, sort of design, so that it is not a kid's book. Like, it is definitely things that are appealing for an adult. A kid could do them for sure, but it is, it's just things that an adult would want and would really love in a home.
And without committing to 40 hours at a loom. You know, these are things you could make in a cup, 2 hours, 3 hours. But then it goes up. So there are projects in the frame loom section that are more of a commitment, where you're really taking the time to make a beautiful fabric, like a window pane fabric and things like that. So for me, it was really, really fun to make this book.
And how did you, I'm imagining though that you didn't come into this knowing how to do all of these things. Like, I know from writing my second book, especially, that even when I signed that contract, I was like, I have a bunch of stuff I got to go learn. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, all right, I'm all cool committing to doing this, but like, I don't actually know all of these things that I'm saying I'm going to be teaching here. You know what I'm saying? But like, I know I can learn how to do them, but like, I don't actually know them all yet. So were there like trips to the library involved? Like, what was the research
There were definitely trips to the library and weaving stores and stuff like that, and books, other resources. It really, you're right. I had done weaving. I've dabbled in many, many crafts. So I had done weaving before. I had done frame loom weaving before, but I am by no stretch a master weaver. And so this was really good because I feel like here I am going to approach this craft from somebody who doesn't have a ton of experience, and like, what would be the fun things to dive into? How would I teach them? What would be the best way to teach? And I have a lot of experience teaching different crafts and teaching beginners and walking people through things in a step-by-step way. And I also have never been afraid of like, well, how would I do this? Well, what would I do? And how would I approach it? And so I would see things on the internet. For example, there's a bolster that's woven in a cane pattern that honestly, I saw it and I thought that would be so cool on a bolster, like a softer bolster. It basically was a hollow. They call them, oh gosh, I'm like blanking. It's a Korean tradition, and it basically is a hollow pillow made with hard cane that is woven in that traditional cane pattern you'd find on like a cane chair. And I call them like huggable wife or something like that. But basically in the hot temperature, it's something for them to hug so that there's still air flowing through. So anyway, it's a neat tradition. But I looked at that and I thought, well, how do I do that? And I tried to find something online and I didn't. So then I'm like, I beat my head against the wall just being like, well, what if I did this? Well, what if I did this? Well, what if could it be wrapped this way? Could it be done this way? And so I basically came up with my own process of how to recreate this pillow, but in a very different material and in a different format. And so a lot of the book is done that way. And, I picked up little bits here and there and skills here and there. And I always try, and if I find something I'm inspired by, I always try and transform it and make it into something my own. And a lot of times I really try and just kind of come up with how to do something on my own. So it's like my own creation. So that's kind of where a lot of this came from.
Yeah. And I do want to touch, before we get to your recommendations, on your experience at Creative Bug, because you have a bunch of classes on Creative Bug. And I know that that's something that a lot of people are curious about and are interested in doing. And so can you just talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you, what you learned from doing that, and just sort of what that added to your sort of toolbox?
I love Creative Bug. I love working with them. They're really creative over there, and they've been super supportive of me and my work. And the best thing about that was learning how to kind of step out your projects and walk through it on camera. It is a different skill to be able to be in front of the camera and explain how to do something. And I loved seeing how that all came together. And really you have to kind of break down your projects into these really bite-sized pieces that you can show and then move in the next one and show the next step and move in the next one and show the next step. And, it made me realize I really like being on camera, and people love videos. People love learning from videos. So I just think it's
craft is absolutely like prime for showing on video, because how many times have you read something and sort of been like, huh? And then you watch like a 20-second video and you're like, oh.
Yeah. It's hard to explain front, back, forward, backward.
Just last night, so my middle daughter is learning how to crochet. And we were reading instructions, and she's just learning to make the slip knot to start.
Right.
And she's like, I can't, getting all frustrated. And then we watched on like Annie's, we watched like the 20-second how to make a slip knot video. Right. And she was like, oh, done.
Right.
Like, totally done.
And I especially think this upcoming generation, that is how they learn. So I've been doing a lot more video and my own video. And so there are actually going to be 3 video class companions with this book. So we're going to make 3 projects in the first chapter together, 3 projects in the second.
And who is making them?
Those I am making. So
you're making them, and then are they free? Or?
Well, so they will be an additional fee. They'll come with the book. There'll be an additional fee. I haven't really decided on the pricing yet, but
then you can sell them yourself.
Yep.
I say co-branded.
But it has to come out with the book. So it has to be a part of the book. In other words, if you want to get the videos, you basically, the price of the videos comes with the book. And if you've already purchased the book, then we can, deduct the book portion off that price. I see.
So it's like a proof of purchase kind of thing.
Proof of purchase.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah. So, because people ask me all the time for videos of the first book, and I just think that's some people really like to learn that way.
Yeah.
And it's a huge expense to videotape everything and do it in a way, for me, that's, at a high
you need
level.
To hire a crew. Just like you needed to hire a photo stylist and a photographer, like we talked about, to make the book. Yep. Same deal. And I've seen it more and more with independent pattern designers who create video classes to accompany a pattern. Like a jeans pattern, and then there's a class how to make the jeans. And so you can buy the pattern for $18, or you can buy the class as well for an additional $45 or $55, whatever, and actually really learn step by step with the instructor, a professional video class. And I think that's brilliant,
Yeah, and I really wanted people to feel comfortable. I feel like that will help more people say, like, I can do this. Because there are a lot of people that look at this and say, like, I don't know how to weave. I don't know if this is for me. And I want to say to them, it is for you. That's exactly who I designed it for. And like, come with me. I'll show you exactly how to do these things.
Yeah, totally.
And so it's to help that kind of in-between person that doesn't necessarily have the confidence to be like, I can learn from a book.
Right. Okay, cool. That's awesome. And I want to make sure we get to your recommendations. Yeah. So we're going to get there now. And although we could talk all day because we've got so many more things to talk about, but okay. All right. So you wanted to recommend, and I'm going to pronounce this brand name wrong. Is it Likey?
Yeah, no, that's right.
Oh, yeah. First, all right. Driftwood needles and hooks. So you said your others got taken away at the airport in Colombia.
Yes. That was hard. They made me take my knitting off my needles and give them my needles. It was very sad. Gosh. But when I came back, I was like, I'm going to see this as an opportunity. And I love beautiful things and I love beautiful tools. And they are just gorgeous. Polished birch wood. And they have this really interesting color variation and they're just gorgeous. And actually I say likey, and so, but it may be pronounced differently. So you and I both might have it wrong.
That's fine.
So
yeah, but there's something nice about using a beautiful tool.
Yeah. So, and all my crochet hooks and like 4 of my needles were gone. So I got full sets of those. That was a big birthday present. But
nice.
Oh
my gosh.
They're so lovely to work with and beautiful to take photos. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll start to see them everywhere.
Okay. Yeah. All right, cool. All right. You have a cork cycle traveling mug.
Yes.
What is that?
It's just a travel mug that I love. And I thought of it because my first one I bought at Squam and I've carried it with me everywhere. And I'm just busy with the kids and running around, and I love coffee, and it keeps it hot for literally hours.
So what does it look like?
It's just like a regular insulated travel mug, but there's something about it. First, it has a very sleek look to it. And it's got a plastic lid with a sliding top. And you know how you can get a lot of those travel mugs and something about it just isn't quite right.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit in your cup holder quite right. Or it I don't know, the lip's annoying, or it leaks, or and this one is just perfect for me. So
got it. Okay.
I've been loving it.
All right.
I love hot coffee.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hear you. All right. You have a bunch of NPR podcasts to recommend, and I love podcasts too. So there's a whole bunch on this list. The Indicator, Hidden Brain, Planet Money. I've never heard of this one though. 1A. What is that one?
Oh, that one is really neat. I like that one. So that's kind of this whole idea around freedom of speech. And so they talk about a lot of current issues, and it comes out every day.
Oh, it's daily.
Yeah. So they'll have a news roundup once a week. And that covers national news and international news. And they usually have 3 or 4 experts that really cover a broad range of opinions. So, you'll get somebody from the Federalist, you'll get somebody from, the Washington Post, you'll get somebody. So I love hearing different opinions with, experts basically, and what they think. You'll get people from The Economist and, also all over. And so I love that. And then they have shorter episodes during the week where they're half an hour about very specific issues. And again, they have, 3, 4, 5 different voices commenting on the topic. And then they are involving also listener comments and questions and voicemails and emails, and it's just really kind of gives you, I feel like, a better sense of different perspectives on an issue.
Okay, good. All right, that's good. And then Sophia Coppola's Rose Bubbly in Cans.
Yeah, this is really funny because I did this post for them and or an interview for them, and they sent me this wine in cans, and I'm not a big wine drinker. I'm actually a beer drinker. But I thought, oh, well, I'll try this. And what's great, and basically I love bubbles. So I am a mad consumer of soda water. That's why I like beer. And this bubbly, I was like, oh, I'll try this. And what's great is you can open it up and have one glass of wine and you don't ruin a whole bottle of bubbly. And so I just have that one glass of wine at the end of the day. It's much lighter than beer. And I find it very enjoyable.
We recently got sangria in cans. Okay, honestly, I know that sounds really bad. It's actually really nice.
Right? It's crazy.
It's weird, but it's good. And
it's just nice to be able to not feel like you're blowing, like you have to drink a whole bottle. I don't want a whole bottle of wine, I just want one glass. And so to have the bubbles feels like such a treat for me. And I've really been enjoying it. That was the best case they ever sent, because now I'm like, I need my Sophia Coppola wine. I've been hunting around in Denver trying to track it down.
That's funny. Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good recommendation. So, Anne, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Walsh and Apps podcast and for coming to visit me here.
Thanks for having me. It's been so much fun. And I love really meeting you.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this.
And thanks for bringing me a copy of your beautiful new book.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And you've been listening to the Walsh and Apps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Visit my blog, walshinapps.com, where you can sign up for my email newsletter to get the best in sewing, blogging, and small business delivered right to your inbox each week. This episode of the Walsh and Apps podcast was sponsored by Search Press North America, independent publishers of fine art and craft books for over 40 years. If you haven't met Debbie Shore and her wonderful half-yard books, now's a great time to check them out. Just published and topping the United Kingdom's bestseller list are the first two concept books, Build a Bag from Debbie Shore. Using 2 supplied durable plastic templates, sewists of all abilities can create beautiful bags for all occasions. Find out more at searchpressusa.com. And if you enjoy the show, tell a friend about it. Thank you so much, and I'll